Jaguar versus Aston is a contest that's raged for years, and it's one we've been lucky enough to be involved with personally for the last few months, with long-term examples of each being run on our fleet. But after a combined 12,000 miles, which of these two icons of British GT engineering do we prefer, and why? And what are the key differences between them when you're behind the wheel?
Although they're both British, they both cost near enough 100 grand, and they're both rear-wheel drive. It's amazing how different these two cars are to drive. The XKR, which is my long-term car, very fortunately, initially feels a lot lazier and a lot more relaxed and comfortable than the Aston, and that's a deliberate intention. It's always been Jaguar's DNA to make really nice, comfortable, beautiful riding cars. The XKR-S pushes that philosophy right to an extreme where it's never really been before, because it is a properly thrusting sports car. And you only really find that out when you properly start to use the throttle and use the paddle shift gearbox a bit and lean it through a few corners. But when you do that, the XKR-S really does come alive. It feels like a total hot rod, to be honest. It actually feels like a car that you could come hugely unstuck in very, very rapidly indeed. And that's because it's got 542 horsepower from its supercharged 5-litre V8 engine. The thing about the way the Jag accelerates, you do not have to be in a low gear. In the Aston, you have to be above 4, maybe even 4,500 revs. And you have to work the engine hard. In the XKR-S, it doesn't matter what gear you're in, you just put your foot down and it goes. That's all to do with its torque. It monsters the Aston when it comes to torque. They both have beautiful cabins. I think if anything I actually prefer the Astons to the Jags, just because it feels that little bit more bespoke, that little bit more special. But this is a lovely place to spend time in this car. It's got a nice balance between feeling really quite sporting. You get this suede rimmed steering wheel and these really heavily bolstered bucket seats, but it's also chilled and comfortable and refined when you're on the move. Even though this one's the soft top, that's great. That's typically Jag. I absolutely love the latest Aston V8 Vantage for all sorts of reasons, but mostly because you can do this kind of thing in it. The moment you climb inside the Aston, it just feels that much more intimate, a little bit smaller, a little bit cosier and slightly more claustrophobic maybe, but it just feels more compact around you. And the moment you start to move in it, it feels more alive, more sporting, more urgent than the Jaguar. I'm a big fan of the Jag's paddle shift gearbox, but there's something really nice and old-fashioned and real about being able to do that yourself and use the clutch and blip the throttle yourself. And that kind of spreads to the Aston throughout. There's a little whiff of old school about it, which is just so refreshing nowadays. And I really do love it. I love the way it sounds too. It feels quite a lot more agile than the Jag, the Aston. It changes direction more crisply. When you hit the brakes, it absolutely just, woof, you lose speed just like that. Whereas the Jag feels like you've got to throw the reins out a bit before it really starts to stop. There's more noise in this car. The ride is less comfortable. The steering is more immediate and heavier. The whole thing just feels much more like a sports car than the Jaguar. But it is not as fast, nowhere near. This is how much faster an XKR-S is compared with an Aston Martin V8 Vantage. We're both in third gear. Go. That's outrageous! Come back! Oh man, he's just torn away. I think I actually accelerated slightly before him as well. Wow. Oh, I don't know. I mean, I really do like driving this Aston Martin. I love the steering and the handling feel. the intimacy of the cabin, all that, it's fantastic. But when an XKR-S does that to you out of a roundabout, I'm not really sure I care that much about the steering feel anymore. So which one overall do I prefer out of the XKR-S and the Aston? I do genuinely and honestly prefer the Jag. Just because it can do that much more under one roof. And in this case, you can lose the roof as well. It's just got more range of abilities, more flexibility as a car, as an everyday car. It's not as much fun, as pure as the Aston when you're really going for it. But for 97% of the rest of the time, I think it's the better car.